Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the November Planning Commission meeting. I hope everyone has voted. If you haven't, you've got 55 minutes. With that, we need to call the roll, please.
Mr. Bacon?
Here.
Mr. Saunders?
Here.
Mr. Bennett?
Here.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
Chairman Harless?
Here. And we have a quorum. If anyone would like a copy of the agenda for tonight's meeting, it's on the podium in the front. Feel free to come up and get a copy. And with that, we want to talk about the minutes from last meeting. And do we have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting?
Move to approve minutes of our October 2nd, 2018 meeting.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bacon?
Yes.
Mr. Saunders?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Chairman Harless?
Yes, and the minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is 4A, and Sarah, you've got that one.
Thank you, Chairman Harless. Item 4A before you is a re-subdivision of Lot 1 of Forest Hill Woods subdivision and part of open space of Lot 2, the subdivision to the south of this, Forest Hill Oaks subdivision. The subject property is located at the corner of Forest Hill Irene Road and Forest Downs Road. It is currently about 2.4 acres, just under 2.4 acres. It is located in the RE1 residential estate 1 acre zoning district, which means that lots of that zoning district should have 1 acre at a minimum. This subdivision, many of the lots are larger, and as you see, this one is just under 2.4 acres. The applicant is proposing to split the lot into 2 different lots. You see here, Lot 1A would be the new lot on the corner of Forest Hill Irene Road and Forest Downs Road, and then 1B is where the house is currently situated. The new lot, it would comply with all the zoning regulations in terms of size, setbacks, etc., as would the other lot that the house is currently situated on. The plat does not make any mention of lot splits, whether they are prohibited. As you can see here, this shows where the lot is located, or where the house is located on the lot. So the lot split then would be right along here. So as a condition of approval for this new lot, the driveway for this house should be situated as far over to this side property line as possible so that traffic will not be obstructed on Forest Hill Irene Road and Forest Downs Road. Additionally, as a condition of approval, there will be a payment in lieu of fee for the new lot, whoever decides to develop the new lot, of $7,475. That would be for street improvements and sidewalk improvements. So it would not be paid at this time, but whoever decides then to put a house on that lot. We did receive letters from neighbors. Majority of the letters were in support, and then there were a couple of letters that were against, and those were included in the agenda packet online and in your packets as well. The applicant is stating that they intend to split the lot then, and then they would potentially sell the new lot to an interested party. The applicant is here for any other questions if you have them.
Do we have a question for staff? So
Yes.
Is there a minimum square footage for a house going on this lot?
There is per the plat, and I want to say it's over 3,000 square feet. Mr. Ray, do you know offhand what the minimum lot size is? Mr. Ray is the property owner.
I believe it's 3,000 on the first floor.
Okay.
So if you wanted to go up, it would be more, but a minimum of 3,000 on the first floor.
Okay, minimum of 3. And again, that is a condition on the plat that would be privately regulated, not by the city.
Okay. You also mentioned that the $7,000 fee is for street and
Sidewalk
sidewalk.
improvements,
But
yes.
in fact, it's not for street, it's only for sidewalk. Is that correct?
Okay,
The road's already widened across the front.
And the city paid for that, so it's only for the sidewalk.
okay, yes, thank you for the correction.
Okay. Other questions for staff? If not, would the applicant like to make a presentation? If you'll state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, I'm Harvey Markham with the Reeves Firm, 6800 Poplar Avenue, Suite 101. Been dealing with Mr. and Ms. Ray for several months regarding this piece of property, and we've done all the background information, gathered that with regard to tree surveys, the land survey, and they are most interested in making this go forward. They've owned this property since 2006, have lived there, and so they would like to achieve this lot split, and think it would be good for the community. Mr. Ray is here, his wife Billy's here also. I think he might have a comment to make. Unless you have any other questions for me, I'll ask Mr. Ray to come up.
Questions for Mr. Markham? If not, the applicant, if you'd like to come forward.
Well, I don't have a whole
Mr.
lot.
Ray, would you state your name and address for the record,
Michael
please?
and Billy Ray. We're at 9125 Forest Downs, Germantown.
Thank you.
And, of course, if we don't have any major opposition, I don't have a whole lot to say. But bottom line, when we bought the place from Miss Piper in January of 2006, almost 13 years ago, she told us, hey, all you got to do is go make an application to the city and you can split your lot. That was kind of a selling point. So we spent a long time and a lot of hard work cleaning the place up when we first bought it. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed, but years ago that was a thicket. It was scrubs and scrappy trees, and it was overgrown. So over a long time and a lot of hard work, we cleaned it up. And all we're trying to do is do what we intended to do when we bought the place, based on the rules and zoning and the neighborhood covenants and all of that. But that's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Do we have questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone
Thank you
in the
all.
audience who would like to speak in favor of this proposal, of this project? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this project? If you'll come forward, please, sir. State your name and address for the record.
My name is Brandon Welford. I live at 3366 Hollow Creek Road. I live in the neighborhood where the subdivision of the 2-acre lot is proposed. I'm representing several neighbors who could not be here tonight because of prior commitments after just learning about the issue from Mr. Ray last Friday. We have not had a chance to completely canvass the neighborhood, but everyone we spoke to about this is against it. Everybody likes the Rays. They're nice people. They've been good neighbors, but they don't want to see the lots subdivided. We all purchased our homes knowing that these 2-acre lots, which provided a different type of neighborhood than many other areas in Germantown. We want to maintain the integrity of our neighborhood and not alter this very unique and special area. If you approve this for one owner, it sets a dangerous precedent for others, including the 2 undeveloped lots in our neighborhood. I don't think the original intent of the recorded covenants for this neighborhood include that there should be more than one residence per lot. There may be a legal loophole here, but I don't think it follows the intent of the covenants that we all agreed to when we purchased our homes in that area. The Rays have expressed an interest in selling their house, and it appears that they are trying to sell an additional lot and then their house. And after abandoning the neighborhood, the remaining neighbors would be left with something that they don't want. The following people have expressed their opposition to this subdivision: the Warmouths, who live across the street, Mike Mullis, Brian Curry, the Obagis, Dr. Williams, and Mike Doyle, who lives next door, originally provided a letter in support, but I understand he's retracted that support at this point for the plan. This plan is a direct assault to the character of our neighborhood. What I'd ask if you would consider, since we've only had since last Friday to really canvass the neighborhood, that you table this. I know it's election night. Some of your members are out tonight, and give us a chance to come back in a month and discuss this further. If you do have to vote tonight, I ask you to reject the proposal for the subdivision of the lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Welford. Questions for, if you'll stay just for a second, we may have some questions. Commission members?
The only question, I guess, would be for Mr. Ray. You know, we always ask that they speak with the neighbors and any developers that come through, meet with the neighbors and tell them what their proposed plan is. And I assume that hasn't been done based on your comments there.
He sent a letter out to the neighbors last Friday, but
Okay.
we just really haven't had enough time to, there hasn't been a collective meeting or a time to really get everybody together.
Mr. Welford, how long have you been in the neighborhood?
Since 2004.
Okay. And in the plat, is there anything that says it has to be a 2-acre lot?
Not that I'm aware of, but all the entire neighborhood is all 2-acre lots. With the exception, there's a couple that are 10 or 12 acres.
Okay. Questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this project? Commission members, questions, comments?
I guess my only question would be to Mr. Ray is, you know, like I said, we usually ask developers to meet with the neighbors. Can you give some input on the letter or when that was sent out, or who you've spoken to out there in your neighborhood, I guess? And I have read the letters of
Okay.
opposition and for your proposal.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Clark, for asking. This isn't a cheap deal. So before we went through all this stuff, we went and personally spoke with the 4 neighbors whose property touches ours. That would be Mr. Michael Fernley, who lives directly across the street. If there's anyone there that would be affected, it would be him. Michael Doyle, who he just said rescinded his letter, which is not true. I just talked to Michael Doyle 45 minutes ago, and he said he would stand behind it. And then the 2 people that live behind us, which would be Mr. and Mrs. Rep King, who would be probably the second most affected by the lot. They were okay with it. And then the Burnhams that live, it's kind of an odd shape, but their lot touches ours. And their lot, I wouldn't think that they would have a big problem with it, but we did talk to the 4 people that their property touched ours. And not only were they okay with it, they wrote letters. So someone that lives on the end of the street that's going to object to a $1 million house on the corner, I mean, I feel like, with all due respect, and it's our opinion that they're fighting something that will actually help them with the comps and so on. Do you have any additional questions?
No, sir, you can stop. I just wanted to make sure you talk to people around you and talk to the homeowners in there.
Okay,
What
thank
you
you.
have, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Commissioners, any other questions? If not, do we have a subcommittee report?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the subcommittee met on October 17th, 2018, and recommended that this item be considered at the regular Planning Commission meeting on November 6th, today, 2018, pending the applicant talk with the neighbors. The applicant has done that, as well as obtained the written opinion of an attorney. See page 12 and 13 of this staff report. Letters of support and opposition are included in the agenda package. The proposed motion tonight, Mr. Chairman, is to approve the re-subdivision of lot number 1, Forest Hill subdivision, and part of open space lot 2, Forest Hill Oaks subdivision, into 2 lots, lots 1A and 1B, subject to the Commission's discussion, staff comments, and conditions in the staff report and documents filed with the application.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, I failed to mention something a while ago. I just wanted to ask staff 2 questions if I could prior to vote.
Certainly.
First one, I just want to make sure that the covenants that are recorded does not speak to anything about subdividing any property. Is that correct? Do you know that to be a fact or not?
So on the plat, there are no restrictions in that regard. We also did our own search on the county register's website of all the instruments and documents that had been recorded. We did not find any. We also asked the project engineers in their research if they had come across any other documents, and they said they had not. So to our knowledge, there is nothing that speaks to that.
Is there an HOA involved?
I don't know if there's an HOA for the neighborhood. No.
There's not.
One other question, just to make myself clear on this thing, is that we're talking about a fee to recapture the cost of the sidewalk in the event there is a development on this lot in the future. Is that correct?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Gwaltney, the city engineer.
Okay. And
Yes.
okay, and that fee is roughly about $7,500 or 73 or something like that.
Yes, correct.
Is there any type of variance that's in our ordinance that gives the Planning Commission the right to waive that due to the fact that this is being put in as part of a street development now? Is there something in our ordinance that would allow us to, it just seems to be unfair, even though it's in our ordinance, to go back and recapture something that's being paid for under a development now?
So Ms. Pounder did do some research while we were sitting here asking about the fee, so.
And again, just to reiterate, we are not requesting full amount that the city is paying for the improvements across that frontage. Again, it's sidewalk only. We're not asking for the cost to widen the road.
I understand that, but I mean, we're doing it now under a project that has been approved and funded. And then we're saying, because our ordinance is that in the future, somebody decides development, we're going to charge them $7,500 to put a sidewalk in. And it just seems to me there should be some type of means or measure, and it may not be, I don't know. You know, I'm just asking. Yeah, that's why I wait on this. Yeah. I know, I wouldn't know what to say.
So, there is a provision for a variance to be granted on subdivisions. The requirement, though, is for the applicant to petition for the variance, and there are some criteria in which you can grant the variance. In this case, you can either table the application and allow the applicant to submit that variance in writing, or you can approve it and request that letter in writing for the variance, and it goes forward to the BMA for approval. So you have a couple of options there, but it is permitted by Section 17-8 of the subdivision regulations.
Could I Also, just add too that there are future developments planned in that area that this same situation applies to. So by waiving, if you choose to waive this situation, again, now this is a situation where waiving it makes sense. It's, I mean, going from one lot to two lots. The developments I'm talking about are, you know, multi-lots that will be required. We're telling them the same thing, though, that they're gonna be required to make payment in lieu of water line improvements, road widening, and the sidewalks. And that's substantial amounts of money for those developments. I just want to make sure you're aware of that this discussion will come up again with future projects.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bacon?
Mr. Chairman, I'm voting yes. The new lot complies with all the zoning regulations, and given that there are no restrictions on the plat or recorded documents relative to anything in the covenants, I'm going to vote yes.
Mr. Bennett?
I'm voting yes, again, for the same reasons Commissioner Bacon mentioned. It's in compliance with our zoning rules and appears to be in compliance with the regulations governing particular subdivision. So I would vote yes.
Mr. Clark?
I too will be voting yes for the reasons stated here before.
Mr. Saunders?
I'm voting yes for the same reasons. It does meet all the requirements in regard to our ordinances and covenants, as is so indicated as recorded on the subdivision now, so it would be yes.
Chairman Harless?
And for the reasons stated by the other commission members, I also vote yes. And the project is approved, and congratulations. Thank you. And we have 3 amendments to ordinances.
Okay, so the first of our 3 text amendments is item 4B, an amendment to the subdivision ordinance, chapter 17, specifically to the parkland dedication section, section 17-60. The purpose of this amendment is so that development projects are more appropriately assessed in terms of their impact that they are making to parkland. Currently, the parkland dedication fee, a parkland dedication, it's either dedicating the land, or if they cannot dedicate the land, then a fee is assessed. And that is for the majority of residential projects. However, per the way the ordinance is currently written, there are some districts which are not included. And here in red, you can see the districts which are being added. It's the retirement housing district and then the smart code districts. So all residential developments occurring in those zoning districts then would be assessed the parkland dedication. The other change to the parkland dedication ordinance is that currently, as it reads, it says that the parkland is to be dedicated in that specific neighborhood. And currently, with our city being primarily built out, that's not always feasible. Therefore, it has been changed to say that the parkland dedication or fee in lieu of occurs citywide where the need is most prevalent. This has been reviewed by the Parks Director and the Parks and Recreation Commission, and pending the Planning Commission's recommendation for approval, it will move forward to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And that concludes staff's report.
Do we have questions for staff? None? Since the applicant doesn't want to make a presentation.
Just did.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this amendment? Seeing none, is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this amendment? Please come forward. Yes, ma'am. State your name and address for the record, please.
Pauline Lathram, 6958 Country Road. I looked at this because I was trying to figure out what kind of, whether this was a tax or a fee, and I believe this is probably a fiscal impact fee. And I know a little bit about that because I've studied Williamson County's fiscal impact fee for the schools. They are currently in litigation with developers. And for the reason that that fiscal impact fee may not be in the same neighborhood as the development. And I actually went online. I finally found a PowerPoint online that was given at the Tennessee Recreation and Parks Conference. It was specifically about parkland dedication ordinances. It said it was a fiscal impact fee. And there are specific rules about fiscal impact fees that I found on the PowerPoint, and particularly about parkland dedication fees. And there are two cases that have to do with constitutional issues. One is Nolan versus California Coastal Commission. One is Dolan versus City of Tigard, Oregon. And the upshot of it was that the new park must be located in proximity of the new residential development. The land or fees dedicated must be spent according to a park system master plan that divides the jurisdiction into geographical districts. The fees collected in the district should be spent in the district, and the development can only be charged a proportional amount of the usage. And I don't see any of these things in what you all are voting on, so I just wanted to bring up the possibility. I don't want to see any more lawsuits against the city. And so I didn't know if this had been looked at by the attorneys. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if this is right or not. I just thought you should run it by people that know something about it. Oh, the other thing was the money must be collected and spent in a timely fashion. Also, I think in addition to this, there's something about the parks director deciding things instead of the park commission. Is that the fees?
Not the fee that is related to the plans. So as a proposed development is, it says here that it should go to the Parks and Recreation Commission, and here the Parks Director is the one that can determine whether or not that there can be, if the parkland dedication is needed, the actual land, or
Okay.
whether the fee would be needed.
So in this case, the parks director would have more say than the park commission.
Not necessarily more say, but the Parks Director maybe has a better idea of where that greatest need would be for the parkland or the fee.
Okay, I'd just like to see a little more oversight on that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Latham. Appreciate your comments. Mr. Harris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was consulting with Mr. Ross, and in light of what's been pointed out, I think it might be wise to not take action on this tonight and let us have an opportunity to look at what's been brought before us, and then we could more appropriately advise the Planning Commission. There are, of course, a lot of other steps in the ordinance amendment. It goes from here to the BMA, so there's a lot of time still to go. But it does seem wise to stop at this point tonight, and we can take it back up after we've had further chance to review it.
Mr. Harris, thanks for your comments. Commissioners, do you have any objection to tabling this amendment? No. None noted. The amendment will be delayed and reviewed during the next 30 days, so I assume we would have it up for our December meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Ross? Yes. Okay. Ms. Latham, thank you very much for your comments and appreciate your research. Ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure, right? Thank you. Let's move on then, since we are tabling that amendment to 4C.
Okay, the next text amendment before you, item 4C, is an amendment to the Vegetation Ordinance, Chapter 22. Specifically, it is in relation to the tree mitigation sections, Sections 22-107 and 22-108, the tree mitigation measures for both residential and commercial properties. Before you is the proposed commercial language. The reason for this amendment, similar to the previous amendment, is so that development projects, that their impact is appropriately assessed. Specifically with the tree mitigation, there are currently 3 options. The first option, the preferred option, is one that any trees removed on the site by that development be mitigated on that site. If they are not able to be mitigated, the second option is that the developer, applicant, then dedicates those trees to public land. Third option is if neither of those can be satisfied, a waiver is granted. And the waiver then is for whatever the applicant and the Design Review Commission decide as being a suitable waiver for the amount of trees removed, and they will not be mitigated. Those are the 3 options right now that we have. As currently stands with many of our developments, there's not often the opportunity to replace the trees completely on site. Nor is there always the opportunity to replace all those trees on city property. So often, the third option has been used where a waiver is granted and the trees are not mitigated. In order to present the city with a third option, that some of the trees be mitigated somehow, if they cannot be replanted, the proposal before you is for a payment in lieu of fee. There are many other cities that do payment in lieu of fees as well. This would not be the first and preferred option. The first option is that they mitigate on site. The second is on public land. And the third is they can request to do a payment in lieu of fee. The payment in lieu of fee then would be assessed based on the fair market value of a 3-inch caliper tree and a significant tree, such as an oak, that brings value to our community. That is then calculated out and would be put into a tree bank fund. The tree bank fund then would be used first place to replace any trees necessary in the city. Second option is then for tree maintenance. Currently, there is not a tree maintenance fee set up separately, so this would help that for if there's a big storm event and there needs to be trees cleaned up on city property, that would provide this option. So that is the main reason for both the commercial multifamily amendment before you and then also for the single family residential amendment before you. So as you've seen this before at numerous meetings, it has been on our agenda for a while now. Through our discussions at other meetings, it has been the request of the commission to discuss a cap. And the cap that is being presented is of $200,000. That is also the cap of the public art fee. The developer has the option to request a lesser cap from the Design Review Commission if they present an arborist report that shows that they have significant trees of value that they are keeping and that would provide then some type of mitigation or asset, then they can request that. But that is at the developer's expense, and that is also at the Design Review Commission's discretion whether or not they would consider that. So, in summary, this is an effort to try to recoup some of the lost trees to our city if we cannot simply replace them on the site or throughout the city.
Questions, commissioners?
I have a question of staff, just to make sure. It appears to me that this is also a more equal way of spreading out the cost where someone has the opportunity to be able to do something like give the trees to the Parks and Rec. If they're not, then they would be held to pretty much the same standard by having to have a payment in lieu of. So it seems to be more of an equal basis, in my opinion. So.
Correct, yes.
Am I correct that, in effect, this is actually going to allow us to have more trees in Germantown, that we will not only maintain the ones we've got, we'll make them healthier, and we'll be able to replace them with these additional funds, if we get the funds, or unless the developer replants trees on the development.
Correct. This would give us more flexibility to help us maintain the trees we have and to help sustain the canopy that we already have. And also, it would give another option rather than just trees then that, let's say right now, the parks director does not identify any sites in parks where trees are needed. However, maybe a year from now, there is a need. We've lost our opportunity. Because at that time, when that project was decided on, we had to decide right then, can they be replaced on site? Can they be replaced on public land? No, a waiver is granted. By having this replacement fund, we do then have the option to later be able to plant some of those trees that we might identify that need later.
Question, are we out of space to plant trees on public land now?
I did talk with the Public Works Director, Assistant Public Works Director, Andy Sanders, about this because his crew, they're the ones that are in charge of maintaining. And he said right now, they don't have an immediate need for a lot of trees. That right now, one of their main concerns is having the resources to maintain a lot of their mature trees and make sure that they don't become hazards. So there's not a need for a ton of new trees at this point.
Do we have any projects now that may be affected by this amendment?
Could you clarify specifically what projects you might?
Well, if we have a subdivision that's going to cut a lot of trees down and not be able to replace all the calipers, will they be able to fall under this new amendment?
So if certain phases of that development have not come through before this passes, then yes. But if this does not pass, or some version of this does not pass before they start their approval and construction plan process, then that would not be assessed then.
Other questions for staff?
I've got a kind of a question and a comment. You mentioned that we belabored this a number of times, going back and forth over it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked about a number of developments where trees were required to put in there. They were put in the neighborhood, either between the sidewalk and the curb, and now they're overgrown and causing problems for the fire trucks and people. Enclave is a prime example of that, where street trees were required. Calipers, trees were mitigated to put back in there, but now it's causing a problem. I guess my question for staff or for whoever is, this is to eliminate that, I guess, so that we don't have to put those trees, shove trees in a neighborhood that really can't accept them. And the other option is to pay this fee.
So again, similar to generally for a project, they have the option to request from the Design Review Commission to have a reduced number of trees, be it just one, or maybe depending on the way the layout is, maybe they can't accommodate trees. They have that option per the way the language reads, to request that waiver from this, and then they would pay into the in lieu fee rather than trying to squeeze trees onto lots that could then potentially create problems for utilities and other infrastructure impacts.
And if this were to pass, that maintenance fee that's put into a pool, that those fees could be used to maintain the current situation of a neighborhood like the Enclave? Or is that private?
It's only for public property.
Okay.
So the first priority would be to, if there were any replacement trees that were needed, like say in parks or street trees. And then the second priority would be to maintain trees on public land. It would not go for properties like the Enclave.
I remember was talking about that, but I couldn't. I just want to make sure this was what we were.
Yes,
that was
this
the
gives
point
the
of it, really.
option
Yeah.
for that. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, as I understand it, under our current ordinance, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you come in and you remove 100 trees, you're supposed to put back 100 trees if you're a developer, correct?
It's based on the amount of inches, the caliper that you're removing. So if you remove 100 inches of trees, be that 2 trees or 10, then you have to replace that amount. And the trees that are assessed are trees that are over 10 inches in diameter breast height.
But my example is if you had to replace 100 trees or 100 inches caliper worth of trees, and that's what you're supposed to do under the ordinance. The developer understands that they have to replace the trees. They know they're going to take down 100. They know they have to put back 100. But it turns out that they can only put back 50 based upon spacing.
Yeah.
And so there's not room on site. They go to option 2, assuming the city would take those 50 trees. They're going to buy them and donate those to the city, and the city can't take those. So at that point, the developer actually could benefit in that they don't have to pay for additional 50 trees, correct?
Correct. That's-
So this really isn't putting the developer in any worse situation. They were assuming they're going to have to pay to get 100 trees back, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Other questions, Commissioners? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to, thank you for staff's presentation, would like to speak in favor of this amendment of this ordinance? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this ordinance? Yes, ma'am, if you'll please come forward. Again, I'm going to ask you to state your name and address for the record.
Complete address, please. Complete address.
Pauline Latham, 6958 Country Road. I think
Complete
it's a-
address, please, ma'am. Your complete address.
6958 Country Road, Germantown, Tennessee, 38138.
Thank you.
I think it's a great idea to have a fund to set up. That's not my issue at all. I have a couple of other issues. I'm going to start with the $200,000 maximum. And I don't know what the amount should be, but what I can't figure out is why it should be a fixed amount instead of a per acre amount. Why would somebody who's developing a 75-acre lot have the same maximum fee as somebody who's developing a 5-acre lot? It just doesn't make sense to me. And I looked up some others, tried to find some others online. Charlotte has a maximum fee, but it's on a per acre basis. And just logic tells me that you wouldn't want to favor large developers over small developers. Okay, that's one thing. I haven't researched the tree ordinance online, but if it is a fiscal impact fee, you also might have problems with developers if you're going to spend the money on maintaining existing trees instead of something related to the development, but I don't know. And there's, the way it reads is a little bit loose, and I have experience in fund accounting. I just want to make sure that everything goes for what it's supposed to go to. And when you talk about maintenance of current trees, that's not really, doesn't have anything to do with saving our trees directly. And I don't want to put our any of our normal expenses into this fund. I want to make sure that this fund is spent to save trees. Maintenance may be fine, but I don't think like cleaning up after a storm is really the appropriate thing to be using this fund for, because that would be just an ordinary expense. Now, I have the some copies of what Portland, Oregon has. This is more of a formal fund accounting where these things would be
Thank you, ma'am.
spent the way you intend them to. It's just a more formal way to set it up. You could add tree maintenance in there as long as that was, you know, legal and everything, but that way people could donate to the fund. It could be administered separately, and it wouldn't get mixed up with operating expenses. We don't want to be transferring operating expenses that we have now into this fund to be paid for by developers, was my point. So those are my 2 points that I have made.
Ms. Latham, thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this amendment ordinance? Seeing none, do we have a subcommittee report?
Yes, sir. Subcommittee met on October 17th, 2018, and recommended that this item be considered at the regular planning commission meeting on November 6, 2018, per the revisions discussed. A motion was proposed to approve the amendments to the tree mitigation, Section 22-107 and 22-108 ordinances, subject to the commission's discussion, staff comments, and conditions in the staff report and documents filed with the application.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any comments, questions from the commissioners? I'm going to just make a comment that I think Mrs. Latham had some good comments. However, I can state that a lot of her comments were questioned in our executive committee meeting, where we talked about making sure that the money that went into this separate fund was kept separate and used only for trees and for helping to maintain the canopy that we have in Germantown that we all enjoy. So I feel very comfortable and confident that we do not have any spillage of funds from our general operating fund into this fund or vice versa. So, but I do appreciate the comments. With that said, any other comments, questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bacon?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to compliment staff. There's a tremendous amount of work and effort that has gone into this over a lengthy period of time. I'm glad that we finally have clarity relative to getting this resolved going forward, so I'm going to vote yes.
Mr. Bennett?
I'm voting yes, and again, I echo Mr. Bacon's comments. The staff's put a lot of time, a lot of hard work, and it's most appreciated from the commissioner.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Saunders?
Yes.
Chairman Harless?
And I vote yes. I think this is a excellent change to the ordinance. I know it took a long time to get there. It went through a lot of variations and steps. So congratulations to staff for all their hard work. And with that, it is approved. Do we have any reports? Oh,
We still have an agenda.
one more. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mrs. Pounder. I thought you were beating me out the door. Next project, please, ma'am.
The next item on the agenda is an amendment to Chapter 23, Wireless Transmission Facility of the City's Code of Ordinance. This is an amendment to Section 2386 of the Germantown Municipal Code. The amendments are twofold. First, we deal with the existing wireless transmission facility. This is an amendment that will amend the existing administrative review process for micro cell towers. Currently, that process for minor modifications for existing towers requires the approval of the Board of Mayor and Aldermans. This amendment would allow staff to review and approve those minor amendments under staff review, utilizing the requirements that have been adopted by the Federal Communication Commission that was approved in September of 2018. That approval established a shot clock, which provided the time period and time limit for the review of minor modifications. The new language, as you can see in the overhead, is underlined, and it will take into account all of the different types of modification, including co-location, the replacement of equipment, and the upgrade of the existing tower. The second amendment has to do with the small cell amendment. It is new language being added to the ordinance that will allow the review of small cell wireless facilities within the city of Germantown. This amendment deals with an adoption by the Federal Communication Commission also, which established the minimum or maximum fees that the local municipalities can charge. It established an application process. It also established the review time and period for these new types of facilities. Also, in June of 2018, the Tennessee General Assembly adopted Public Charter 819. And it also established uniform application process, fees, rates that are permitted to be charged for these types of applications. It established time limits for review, which is also considered a shot clock. And it established the types of installation and also what we can include in an aesthetic plan in the review of these types of towers. To that end, we have created a new application for the small cell wireless facilities. Going through our process, it is unfortunately a 4-page application. As you can see, it's pretty long, but this allows for the batching of applications, which the state law now allows up to 20 small cells to be submitted at one time. So this application process will now give us that capability to be able to look at all of those types of facilities through one process and dealing with the shot clock and making sure that we adhere to those regulations. Also, we are in the process of updating the design manual to add an addendum to that manual, which would be part of the aesthetic plan. As part of the approval for small cells is that we can only regulate the aesthetic of those types of facilities as long as the plans that we have apply across the board to all wireless facilities that we review, and even to any type of infrastructure that may be within the right-of-way. So by updating this plan, we already have several policies and regulations that have been adopted over the years. We are putting those together under an addendum in the DRC manual so that we can review that as we go forward. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman, Sheila, so, I mean, in the aesthetic plan, I mean, these facilities can vary. I know there's a lot of tech here with what's going on, but these facilities can vary in size, is that correct?
They can vary in size, they can vary in appearance. One of the things that they can be attached to stop signs, mast arms, they can be attached to any other type of structures that are already in the right-of-way. Because we already have guidelines about what our mast arms must look like, what our street lights must look like in new residential areas, we can also require those attachments to those type of poles to mimic or be similar to those designs.
So there'll be conditions, and I know we talked about this in subcommittee, but there'll be conditions where something could be constructed in the right-of-way that's completely separate from a light fixture or a mast arm.
Yes.
Or, I mean, it could be its own little unit or whatever that's constructed
It could be
in
a
the
new pole installed,
It could be
yes.
whatever it is. So,
Yes.
but the city will still, from the standpoint of the aesthetic plan, we'll still have an opportunity in some way to control what that looks like?
Depending on what that construction is that they are.
Depending on how big it is or whatever it is.
Depending on what it is. If it is a small cell tower structure, pole structure itself, we can only look at maybe the color that it's going to be. We can look at what's surrounded. If it's close to a mast arm, if it's close to a light pole, then we can require it to be very similar. But if it's not, we cannot require them to make those type of changes. We're very limited in what our scope of changes can be. And that's one of the reasons because we do have something already on the books, we're able to basically take that and add to it.
So, and then we won't have any control over where they go, per se.
We have very minimum control about where they go. There are some spacing requirements that, because of the technology itself, requires them to be spaced so far. Also, because small cells basically are supplementing the micro towers, so you still will have to have the tall, big micro towers.
That was going to be my next question.
Exactly.
So the big monopoles, these actually, with the new technology, feed back into the monopole.
That's correct.
Okay.
Other
And then-
questions?
And then I guess there was a comment made in the executive committee meeting just a minute ago, but, so we've already heard from MLGW, they're not going to allow these to be attached to?
Actually, MLGW is now in conversation with some of the carriers. We don't know what the results of that conversation has been at this point in time.
Thank you.
The benefit for these new small transmission units will be what?
The benefit is they are now rolling out what is called 5G. Because of the amount of data and cellular use that we now have, we will have faster transmission. Hopefully here in the city, you will have better reception. But again, we don't know all of those benefits until locations have been determined and where they're going to actually be. But
This could be a situation where, there's been a lot of conversation about the holes in the city, and the monopoles are actually going to help that, but where there are specific dark areas, I mean, the carriers, the companies, the providers will pretty easily be able to get in with these small cell transmission facilities and fill those holes. Is that
that
correct?
is the intent.
The hope. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to go back to Mr. Bacon's question about putting a pole in the right-of-way in front of somebody's house, and we have no control over it going in? Is that?
If it meets the federal and state requirements, we will not have any control about whether that pole can go there or not. We will have control and be able to keep up with where those poles are located, making sure that they meet the height requirement, and again, if they're in the residential area where we have decorative streetlights, we can require that type of design for some of the poles. But we have very, very limited oversight on the location.
So in the neighborhoods, these could theoretically go in on a street in the neighborhood in front of somebody's house.
They could, but one of the things that we are looking at and we're trying to work through is making sure that whatever goes in, they go in the right location so that they are not too intrusive into the neighborhoods.
So we do have control over that.
We have a little bit of control. It just, again, it depends on spacing. It depends on where the micro towers are located. It depends on the coverage that needs to be. Because there is also a height limitation. Most of these will be about 50 feet max, but they can go 10 feet above that depending on what's around them. If there are other infrastructure items in that area that's over that height, they can increase their height.
They can be 25 feet?
No.
50, I'm sorry.
50 feet, they can go up to 50 feet.
50 feet?
But if there is for instance, if there is a mast arm that's within 50 feet of that pole, then they can go 10 feet above that.
Hypothetically, if a carrier said, we want to put a 50-foot pole in front of Mr. Bacon's house in the enclave, okay? Can we say, this area is okay, but we want you to put it in the back of his yard or in the adjacent greenway as opposed to in the front?
No, sir. We can ask the carriers to consider that, but we cannot require it.
So our option tonight is to not approve this?
You cannot approve this, and the carriers will still be able to come into the city and place those poles. They will be doing it with no oversight from staff, without benefit of any review process whatsoever.
And that's because of what the FCC and the state of Tennessee
It's because both the
FCC and
FCC
state
and the
passed.
state regulations, yes. You cannot deny the application.
So in effect, the city's hands are tied in regard to these towers and where they go?
Pretty much so.
Pretty much so.
Yes.
Comments, commissioners? Is there anyone, thank you, Ms. Pounders. Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this project? Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this project? Mr. Clark, do we have a subcommittee report?
Yes, sir. The subcommittee met on October 17th, 2018, and recommended this item be considered at the regular Planning Commission meeting on November 6th, 2018. The motion was to approve the two text amendments to the Wireless Transmission Facilities Section 2386 ordinance, subject to the Commission's discussion, staff comments, and conditions in the staff report and documents filed with the application.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments, commissioners, questions? If not, please call the roll.
Mr. Bacon?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote yes. And I compliment Ms. Pounder and the tremendous amount of research that she's had to do very quickly, and this is obviously going to be something that's going to impact the city with these applications fairly dramatically. It's going to be interesting to see how this rolls out, but I'm going to vote yes because we as a city are going to need to do everything we possibly can to try to maintain as much control over this as possible. I'm not sure exactly what that is right now. I don't know that we really know, but given this is an FCC and state of Tennessee legal issue, I think we're going to have to try our best. So I'm voting yes.
Mr. Bennett?
It's going to be reluctant, yes. I don't, not in favor of the state law or the federal law, but I don't want to be on the other side of them either. So to the extent that I don't want to be sitting out there and them dictating where they're going to do without any oversight. So for that reason, I'm going to vote yes, although I disagree with the entire concept that they can come to our community and do what they want to. But by the same token, I want to make sure that our local folks can at least offer whatever insight and input they can to control where these towers are going to go. So that's what we're doing, is to allow our staff to prepare for that and to be able to use the resources we have to at least modify to some extent what's going to happen. So we appreciate them doing that and bringing this to our attention. So again, reluctant yes.
Mr. Clark?
I couldn't agree more with my former commissioner's comments on this. I too will be voting yes, and reluctantly as well, but yes.
Mr. Saunders?
Be voting yes. Just echo everything's been said so far, but then again, looking at some of the things, the reason why we're going to the 5G is for first responders capability, and I'm sure that has something to do with some of the laws that's been dictated to us to be able to handle it.
Chairman Harless?
I'm on the horns of a dilemma. I think our community has dead spots in it, as we all know, and for first responders and for emergency calls, we need the coverage, and I think these new small cells will provide that. But as the other commissioners mentioned, I hate having somebody dictate to us what's going to happen in our community. With that, I vote yes. And the project is approved. And do we have any reports from liaison? If not, we stand adjourned. Thank you.